You can become a good trainer without recording data, but you'll become a good trainer a lot faster if you do record your data. The reasons why we record data are, number one, to track an animal's progress, to track our own progress, to have evidence about effectiveness of our techniques. Without doing that, it's just all confirmation bias. And then recognizing patterns in training. Okay, so the first thing to do is to have an overall plan with your major milestones. And that is a plan for the whole life of the animal. What are you going to want that animal to do? Because when you start training, you're going to figure out that sometimes you train things that you really wish you hadn't have trained before you trained some other things that you feel like you need to train. So having an overall plan really, really helps. When you're making a training plan, you've got to go off of a training plan. Our 26 tasks are our training plan that we've worked out over the course of the years as the most effective way to get the job of getting these wild horses and burros tame. So this is what we've worked out. But when you start out, you're not going to have your training plan unless you just adopt our training plan or adopt somebody else's training plan. You're going to be developing your own training plan. So what the first thing to do is define your objectives, your learning objectives, and then define what cue or signal will be the sign to the animal that it's time to do that particular thing. Okay, and it's really important to think these things through so that you don't end up duplicating cues to mean two things. Sometimes whoa means slow down, sometimes whoa means stop. Now, what does whoa mean? Whoa here always means stop your feet, quit moving. Okay, but you want to be really careful to think through each thing that you want to be able to signal to the animal that it is time to do that. Step 2 is set your QC for the goal. So the QC is the quality control. It's what the animal actually needs to be able to do in order to have met the criteria for learning that task. And so when can you say without a doubt that the animal has learned it well enough? An example of that that we use quite a bit of the time is doing it correctly 3 times consecutively or 3 times in a row. Step 3, we need to, while we are looking at the overall goal and the learning objective, we know we're going to need to break that down into smaller steps. So we try to anticipate how to break the big thing down into very small steps. So, for example, teaching an animal to walk, to follow you. If first you reinforce the animal picking its foot up and moving it in the correct direction, okay, you can see picking the foot up, that's one thing. Moving it in the correct direction, that's another thing. So you can break a simple thing of taking one step down into a couple of different parts and then reinforce each one of those. And a little tip for you to think about is when you're teaching an animal to lead, if you can teach it to pick up its foot and step forward, you've got the job half done right there, okay? That's all you really need to get that animal thinking about doing, and you will have an animal that leads pretty easily. Okay, step 4 is organize your motivators and your environments, okay? Minimize distraction in your environment and maximize the effectiveness of your motivators. Now, some animals are going to work well just for food. Some animals are going to work better for petting. Some animals, when you add petting and food, you get a multiplier effect and you've got a lot better reinforcement. So you've got to look at the animal, study it, figure out what is going to be the most effective thing to motivate that particular animal, and then look at the environment that you have and try to maximize your ability to train in that environment by setting things up, not having safety problems. And then the fifth thing to do when you're making a training plan is try to think about contingencies for undesirable behaviors that the animals might do instead of what you wanted them to do. So think about if the animal kicks me, or if the animal, whatever, the animal runs away, or whatever it is, try to kind of have a little bit of a plan in your mind where you've thought through what you're going to do if that happens. And that will do a lot for making your training sessions go really easily, because when you imagine problems, then you are more likely to head them off before they ever occur. But if you go into your training session and never have given a thought to what could possibly go wrong, you're more likely to suddenly be surprised. One of the most important things that you can do is make a list of all the cues that are going to be used in that animal's lifetime. There's a reason you want to make a list of cues. You want to define for the animal one correct behavior that it can do at this time in response to each cue. It's a signal to the animal as to what it can do right now to earn reinforcement. If you're not a very refined trainer, you'll realize that you tend to use ambiguous cues that don't provide the animal with sufficient information. The result of that is a confused animal, and it's really not fair, especially when you're using pressure as the motivator. Sometimes you actually want to use more cues than just one, even though the standard practice is one single cue for each behavior. Sometimes you'll want to have other cues, especially if you're training an animal for someone else that you don't really know what kind of cue they're going to use for that animal. Okay, the next big question is whether or not you're going to use a computer or you're going to just use paper. Paper is less searchable and it's less easy to study, but it's a lot easier to use in any place and any time. A computer is a real pain to input. You have to sit down at a computer and type in your data, which is very painful. It seems like a tablet or a cell phone would do a better job on input. However, I have not found that to be the case. I found that to be a lot slower at typing wherever I want to put in descriptions. So I haven't been real happy with inputting computer data. However, I do have tens of thousands of records on the computer. The best thing is to put them on paper and then to move them over onto the computer. Either way, what it takes to get this done is a lot of discipline. You have to make yourself write data after every session, and that's not after 2 days of sessions. That's at least a couple times a day. You will find that you cannot remember enough detail after you've trained 4 or 5 animals. So 3 animals, maybe 2 animals, better. Writing down after every animal is the best. Either way, discipline is required. So I suggest that you also have it easy to access a little bit of reinforcement for yourself, such as snacks and cups of tea for sitting down and writing data. Writing in a journal is the best thing for the trainer, and the reason that you do this is for the trainer. The trainer learns a lot by writing down their information in a journal. So what I have in my training journal is I have the date, the name of the animal, the task that I'm teaching it. I keep track of the amount of time in minutes that I've spent, I describe the procedure. I try to write about any kind of challenge that occurred and any kind of solution that I found. So here we have an example in my training logbook from 1/29/2018. This was Frank the burro, and we were training tasks 25.3 and 25.9, which was holding the hooves off the ground for a countdown of 5. So here I have positive reinforcement for tiny duration, positive double reinforcement for duration. That's what I used to show how many bites they got. I may actually have a number up there instead of just a plus mark. And then LRS for stepping. What's LRS? That's the least reinforcement scenario for stepping. So I tried to negatively punish stepping away. Then I've got my challenge here. Frank seemed keen to train, but he may have been overly motivated and kept stepping back instead of just lifting fronts. He was able to hold hinds for much longer. Next time, repeat. Okay, so that's what it takes. Now, we also keep a checklist for the animals so that we can keep track of on the individual animal. Each animal has its own book. Here we have Chikorita's book, and Chikorita is a donkey, and she was trained in March of 2018. So if we look here on task 13, stick head through the loop of rope, you can see that she was trained on 2 days. She's got 2 days down marked as no training with no time on it, and then she's got 2 days with time. We've checked off what she was able to complete on each of those days, and then some notes on the bottom. She did 328. She did great. Just got to get her to stick her head on her own all the way. On 329, note, stroked around neck and ears first, then asks for target into loop, pushes up to ears with no problem. So you can see how this is very handy for keeping track of the animal's progress. And this goes through all 26 of our tasks. You have to decide if you're going to record quantitative data or qualitative data. Quantitative data is associated with a number or a value, whereas qualitative is more of a quality that may not be measurable with numbers. So some examples of quantitative things that you could measure: how frequently the animal does the behavior, how much latency between the time when you ask the behavior and when the animal performs the behavior, how many times in a row the animal will do the behavior, how long it took to train them. That's a different kind of strategy. How much time is involved somehow. How much duration. How long will the animal continue doing it? Okay, you can also measure a few emotional things with quantitative data. How close you can come before the horse leaves. How long does a horse stay in vigilance in the presence of a distraction? So there's a lot of quantitative data. The reason to collect quantitative data is then you can do statistical analysis of it. However, a lot of times it's easier just to use qualitative data if you're not going to be using it as a study. So here we have a little form that I've got that you could check off for qualitative data. We might ask questions about training level. How well is the animal trained? We might ask how hard is the animal trying? Is the animal not trying, or is the animal giving it everything it's got? We might ask the actual ability of the animal to perform the behavior, especially when we're talking something that requires some kind of muscle conditioning. Fear shown. We might just keep track of how much fear the animal is expressing. Is it tense? Is it how relaxed is the animal? Any anger shown, okay? Animals with anger management issues, you may want to start tracking their anger so that you know when they're having a good day and when they're having a bad day, and you can start seeing the patterns in that. Resistance to movement. This can be quite important, especially with donkeys. Will they just refuse to budge, or will they go along with you? Makes quite a bit of difference when you're training. Engagement with the trainer. Are they interested and engaged with you, or are they totally unfocused and thinking about other things? Response at liberty. What if you just turn the horse loose? Would it still do the behavior? You can record your data in any format that's convenient to you. Okay, I think with that, you're ready to go out and start making a plan and keeping track of your sessions. Good luck.